Ada Whitmore pushed open the barn door at Lost Creek Ranch and froze. A man lay bleeding in the hay, his weathered tan coat dark with blood, his angular face turned toward her with the desperate calculation of a cornered animal. She should have screamed. She should have run back to the house for the rifle. Instead, she stepped inside and pulled the door shut behind her. The stranger's hand moved toward his hip, then stopped. No gun. His sandy brown hair was matted with sweat. His shirt torn where something, a bullet or a blade, had caught his shoulder. He watched her with pale eyes that held more wariness than threat. "Who are you?" she said, keeping her voice low. Her father was in town. Her younger brother was mending fence on the north pasture. She was alone with a wounded man who had broken into her barn, and the closest neighbor was 3 miles away. The man's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" "It does, if I'm going to help you." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or suspicion. "You don't know me." "No. But you're bleeding on my property, and if you die here, the sheriff will have questions I can't answer. So either you tell me who you are, or I go get that rifle and we settle this a different way." He studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "Silas Crow." The name hit her like a fist. Silas Crow, the outlaw who had robbed the stage near Copper Bend 2 years ago. The man with a price on his head. The reason the territorial marshal had ridden through Red Springs last month, asking questions. She should have gone for the rifle then. Should have run. Should have done anything except what she did next, which was kneel beside him in the hay and reach for his shoulder. "Don't," he said, but his voice had lost its edge. "If I don't, you'll bleed out by morning. Then I'll have a body in my barn and a marshal asking why I didn't report a wanted man on my land. You could report me now. I could. But I won't." "Why?" She didn't have a good answer. Maybe because she recognized something in his eyes. The same trapped exhaustion she saw in her own reflection every morning. The look of someone who had been running too long with nowhere left to go. "Because I've made mistakes too," she said quietly. "And I know what it's like when no one gives you a second chance." She fetched water from the well, tore strips from an old shirt she kept in the tack room, and cleaned the wound as best she could. It wasn't as bad as it looked. The bullet had grazed his shoulder, carving a deep furrow but missing bone. He would heal if infection didn't set in. He didn't make a sound while she worked, though she felt the tension in his muscles every time she pressed the cloth against torn skin. When she finished, she stepped back and wiped her hands on her skirt. "You can stay until morning. Then you need to leave." "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care. Just not here." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. She did care. She cared too much, and that was going to be a problem. She brought him food that night after her father had gone to bed. Bread and cold chicken, a jar of water. He ate like a man who hadn't seen a decent meal in weeks, and when he finished, he looked at her with something close to gratitude. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If anyone finds out I helped you, they'll hang us both." "Then why did you?" She hesitated. "Because I'm tired of being alone. Because this ranch is dying, and I can't save it by myself. Because you looked at me like I was a person, not just a problem." But what she said was, "I don't know." The next morning, he was still there. She told herself she should make him leave. But when she walked into the barn and saw him trying to stand, his face pale with pain, she knew he wasn't going anywhere. "Not yet." "You need rest," she said. "I need to move. Someone's going to come looking." Let them. No one comes out here anymore. It was true. Lost Creek Ranch sat at the edge of Red Springs territory, where the good water ran dry and the grazing land turned to scrub. Her father had bought it cheap 15 years ago, hoping to build something. Instead, he had watched his dreams wither under the relentless sun, while neighbors with better land and better water prospered. Now those same neighbors wanted what little water she had left. 2 days later, Clayton Voss rode up to the house. He was a big man with a thick beard and eyes like flint, the kind of man who measured his worth in acres and head of cattle. He owned the largest spread in the county, and he wanted her water rights. "Miss Whitmore," he said, tipping his hat. "Your father home? In town. Can I help you with something?" His gaze drifted past her toward the barn. "Just wanted to check on you folks. Heard there's been trouble with drifters." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "We're fine. That's so. Because Sheriff mentioned a man fitting a certain description was seen heading this direction few days back. Wanted man. Dangerous. I haven't seen anyone." Voss smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, if you do, you let me know. Wouldn't want anything to happen to a lady out here all alone." It wasn't a threat. Not quite. But it didn't have to be. She knew what he wanted. He had already tried to buy her father out twice, offering half what the land was worth. When that failed, he had diverted the creek that fed their main pasture, claiming water rights that didn't exist. Now he was looking for leverage, and he had found it. That night, she told Silas he had to leave. "It's not safe. Voss knows something." Silas looked at her from where he sat mending a broken bridle, his hands steady despite the healing wound. "What does he want?" "Our water. Our land. Everything." "Then I'll go. I won't bring trouble to your door. You already have. But if you leave now, he wins anyway. He'll claim I'm too weak to hold this place, and he'll take it piece by piece until there's nothing left. So what do you want me to do?" She met his gaze. "Help me fight him." It was a desperate gamble, trusting an outlaw to save her ranch. But she had run out of options, and something in his eyes told her he was tired of running too. Over the next week, they worked together. He helped her mend the fence Voss's men had cut. He showed her how to read tracks, how to tell when someone had been snooping around the property. He taught her to shoot, standing behind her in the dusty yard, while she learned to steady her aim. And slowly, something shifted between them. It happened on a Wednesday. They were working on the north fence line, replacing posts that had rotted through, when the sky opened up. The storm came fast, the way they do in open country, turning the world gray and violent in minutes. They ran for the barn, but the rain caught them halfway. By the time they stumbled inside, they were both soaked through, water streaming from their hair and clothes. Ada pushed wet strands from her face and laughed, a sound she hadn't made in months. Silas stared at her. "What?" "Nothing. I just forgot what it felt like to laugh." He stepped closer. She should have moved away, should have remembered who he was, what he was, but she didn't. And when he reached up to brush a drop of water from her cheek, she let him. "Ada," he said quietly. Don't what? Don't make me want something I can't have." His hand fell away. "You think I'm not good enough for you. I think you're running from something, and I think sooner or later you'll leave. Everyone does." There it was. The wound she had been carrying since her mother died, and her father retreated into silence. since the neighbors stopped visiting, and the town started calling her the lonely Whitmore girl. Since she realized she was fighting a losing battle, and no one cared enough to help. "I'm not running anymore," Silas said. "You say that now. I mean it." She wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly, it hurt. But wanting and trusting were different things, and she had learned the hard way not to confuse the two. The storm raged outside, rattling the barn walls. Inside, they stood in the dim light, close enough to touch but separated by more than distance, by secrets and scars and the weight of choices neither could undo. The next morning, the damage was clear. The storm had torn through the ranch, collapsing part of the main pasture fence and flooding the low field where they kept the horses. It would take weeks to repair, and they didn't have weeks. Voss would see the damage and push harder. "We need help," Ada said, surveying the destruction. "Who's going to help us?" She didn't have an answer. Her father was too proud to ask. Her brother was too young to be useful. And the townspeople had made it clear years ago that the Whitmores were on their own. That afternoon, Voss rode up again. This time, he brought 2 men with him. They sat their horses like sentries, watching while Voss dismounted and walked toward Ada with the slow confidence of a man who knew he had already won. "Heard about the storm," he said. "Shame about your fence. We'll manage. Will you? Because from where I stand, looks like you're about one disaster away from losing everything. But I'm a reasonable man, Miss Whitmore. I'll buy you out. Fair price. You and your father can start over somewhere else. This is our home. Homes where you can afford to stay. And you can't afford this place anymore." Silas stepped out of the barn then, and everything changed. Voss's eyes narrowed. His men's hands moved toward their guns. The air went tight with the promise of violence. "You," Voss said slowly. "You're Silas Crow." Silas didn't move, didn't confirm or deny, just stood there with his hand near his hip, where a gun would be if he had one. Voss's smile spread. "Well now, this is interesting. You hiding a wanted man, Miss Whitmore. He's helping me fix my fence. That's so. Or maybe you're in on it. Maybe you've been sheltering him all along. Sheriff's going to be real interested to hear that." Ada's blood went cold. If Voss told the sheriff, she would lose everything. The ranch, her reputation, possibly her freedom. And Silas would hang. "Get off my land," Ada said. Voss laughed. "Or what? You'll shoot me. With what gun? The one your outlaw friend doesn't have." He was right. They had nothing. No leverage, no weapon, no way to stop him from doing exactly what he threatened. But then Silas said, "The stage robbery at Copper Bend. I didn't do it." Voss stopped smiling. "I was there," Silas continued. "But I wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. That was your son." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Voss's face went dark. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Because I can prove it. I kept the saddlebag your boy dropped when he ran. Still has his initials carved in the leather. Still has the bills from the Red Springs Bank inside. You son of a..." Silas cut him off. "You want me silent. You leave this ranch alone. You stop pushing for water rights you don't have. You stop trying to buy them out. And you tell the sheriff you were mistaken about seeing me here. Do that. your secret stays buried. Ada stared at him. It was a bluff. It had to be. But Voss didn't know that, and the uncertainty in his eyes said Silas had struck something true. Voss looked between them, his jaw working. Then he turned and mounted his horse. "This ain't over," he said. But they all knew it was. When he was gone, Ada turned to Silas. "Do you really have proof?" No. She should have been angry, should have been terrified. Instead, she started laughing. The kind of wild, half-hysterical laughter that comes when you've stared down death and survived. "You just bluffed Clayton Voss with nothing." He shrugged. Seemed like the right move. That was the stupidest, most reckless, She stopped. "Most incredible thing I've ever seen." Their eyes met. And this time, when he reached for her, she didn't pull away. The kiss was not gentle. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like dust and rain. It was the kiss of two people who had been alone too long, who had stopped believing in second chances, who suddenly realized they might have found something worth holding on to. When they broke apart, she was shaking. "We can't," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because you're wanted. Because this is impossible. Because I'm terrified you'll leave." His hands framed her face. "I'm not leaving. Not unless you tell me to. Promise me." "I promise." For 3 days, they lived in a fragile peace. Silas worked on the fence while Ada tended the animals and tried to figure out how to make the ranch profitable again. Her father came home from town and accepted Silas's presence with the weary resignation of a man too tired to fight. At night, they sat on the porch and talked about the ranch, about the future, about the lives they had left behind and the lives they wanted to build. He told her about the robbery, how he had fallen in with the wrong people after his own ranch failed, how he had been there when Voss's son, drunk and reckless, had shot the stage driver, how he had run because no one would believe an outlaw over a wealthy rancher's boy. She told him about her mother's death, about the loneliness that had settled over the ranch like dust, about the shame of being the woman no one wanted, stuck on a failing property with no prospects and no hope. "You're not unwanted," he said quietly. "Easy for you to say. I mean it. You're strong and smart and braver than anyone I've ever met. If they can't see that, they're fools." She wanted to believe him. And for the first time in years, she almost did. But peace never lasts on the frontier. On the 4th day, her brother came racing back from town, his horse lathered and wild-eyed. Ada ran out to meet him, her stomach knotting with dread. "What happened?" "It's Voss. He's telling everyone you're sheltering Crow. Says you're an outlaw sympathizer. The sheriff's organizing a posse." Silas appeared at her side. "How long?" "They'll be here by sundown." Ada's mind raced. If the sheriff found Silas here, she would be arrested as an accomplice. The ranch would be seized. Her family would be ruined. But if Silas ran, Voss would still take the ranch, and she would still lose everything. Unless they fought back. "What if we told the truth?" she said. "About Voss's son?" Silas shook his head. "No proof. It's my word against his, and I'm the one with a wanted poster." "Then we get proof." "How?" "We make them confess." It was insane. It was dangerous. It was the only chance they had. They rode to Voss's ranch that afternoon, the 3 of them, Ada, Silas, and her brother. who insisted on coming despite her protests. The plan was simple. Get Voss's son talking. Get him to admit what he had done. And do it in front of witnesses. The problem was finding witnesses willing to stand against Clayton Voss. They found them in the most unlikely place. The saloon in Red Springs was full of men who owed Voss money, who had lost land to his schemes, who resented his power but were too afraid to challenge it. Ada walked in with Silas at her side, and the room went silent. "I need your help," she said. No one moved. "Clayton Voss has been stealing from all of you. Water rights, land, livestock. He uses fear and money to get what he wants, and he destroys anyone who stands against him. But I can prove his son is a criminal. I can prove the Voss family isn't untouchable. If you help me." One man laughed. "Why would we risk that? Because if you don't, he'll come for you next. He'll take everything you have, piece by piece, and you'll let him, because you're too scared to fight back." The room stayed silent. Then an older rancher named McKay stood up. He had lost half his herd to Voss's manipulations the year before. "What do you need?" "Witnesses. I need you to come to Voss's ranch and hear what his son has to say. I need you to be willing to testify if it comes to that." Slowly, others stood. Not everyone, but enough. They rode out together, a ragged group of ranchers and farmers who had finally decided they were tired of losing. When they reached Voss's spread, the sun was low on the horizon, painting everything in shades of orange and red. Voss met them at the gate, his face thunderous. "What is this?" "Justice," Ada said. She dismounted and walked toward the house. Silas stayed close, his presence a reminder that she wasn't alone. The other men fanned out behind them, a silent wall of support. Voss's son came out onto the porch. He was younger than Ada expected, maybe 25, with the soft edges of someone who had never faced real consequences. When he saw Silas, his face went pale. "That's him," he said. "That's the man who robbed the stage." Silas smiled, cold and sharp. "Funny. I remember it different." "You're lying." "Am I? Then why do you look so scared?" "I'm not." She said more of the stite. Let's it was with sight, so placed around her. "I'm mentling the soy, where there another, him said. This place where a lost whiles white. Whist tired. Cone like granding it into cowden out. Clau Felmai has done, call the crime and responds the twice. Tell them what happened at Copper Bend. Tell them who pulled the trigger. I don't know what you're talking about." Silas took a step forward. "You were drunk. You shot the driver because he wouldn't hand over the strongbox fast enough. Then you panicked and ran. And I was the only witness, so your father made sure I took the blame. But you kept a souvenir, didn't you? That saddlebag with your initials. The one you thought you lost." The son's face crumbled. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "It was an accident." The crowd murmured. Voss lunged forward, grabbing his son's arm. "Shut up. Don't say another word." But it was too late. The truth was out, witnessed by a dozen men who had no love for the Voss family, and every reason to see them brought down. The sheriff arrived an hour later with his posse, expecting to arrest Silas and Ada. Instead, he found a crowd of respected ranchers demanding justice for a 2-year-old murder. He found Voss's son confessing through tears. He found a situation that couldn't be swept under the rug. And he found Silas Crow, standing quietly beside Ada Whitmore, no longer running, The trial took 3 weeks. In the end, Voss's son was convicted of manslaughter. Voss himself faced charges of obstruction and bribery. The empire he had built crumbled, and the land and water rights he had stolen were returned to their rightful owners. Ada got her creek back. She got her reputation back. And she got something else too. Silas stayed. The pardon came through in late summer. With Voss's testimony and the confession of his son, the territorial governor agreed to clear Silas's name. It wasn't a full exoneration, but it was enough. Enough to stop running. Enough to build a life. They were married in the fall. A simple ceremony in the Red Springs church, with her father and brother as witnesses. The townspeople who had shunned her for years suddenly found reasons to visit, to offer congratulations, to pretend they had always believed in her. She accepted their words with polite distance, knowing the truth. They hadn't come because they cared. They had come because she had won. Winter came, and with it the hard work of rebuilding. They repaired the fences, restocked the herd, diverted water back to the pastures that had gone dry. Silas proved to be as skilled at ranching as he was at surviving, and slowly, Lost Creek Ranch began to thrive. On cold nights, they sat by the fire and made plans. A new barn come spring, more cattle, maybe a foal or two. The kind of future Ada had stopped letting herself imagine. "You happy?" Silas asked one night, his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him. "Yes. No regrets." "About what?" "Marrying an outlaw." She smiled. "You're not an outlaw anymore." "Still. People talk. Let them. I don't care what they think." And she didn't. For the first time in her life, she didn't care about the opinions of people who had never cared about her. She had something better. She had a partner. She had a future. She had a man who looked at her like she was worth fighting for. Spring brought new challenges. A late frost killed half the early crops. A mountain lion took 2 calves. The creek ran low, and for a week they worried it might dry up completely. But they faced it together, and that made all the difference. One morning in early April, Ada woke to find Silas already up, standing at the window and looking out over the land. She joined him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about? How different things could have been if you hadn't opened that barn door. If you had turned me in, but I didn't." "Why not?" She thought about it. "Because I needed someone to see me, really see me. Not the lonely girl, or the failing ranch, or the woman no one wanted. Just me." He turned to face her. "I see you. I know." And that was enough. That was everything. By summer, the ranch was producing again. They sold cattle at market and made enough to pay off the last of her father's debts. They hired a hand to help with the heavy work, a young man from town who reminded Ada of her brother, eager and earnest. Her father smiled more. Her brother talked about staying, about building his own place on the north section someday. The ranch that had felt like a millstone around her neck had become a home again. And through it all, Silas was there. Steady. Reliable. Hers. They had their fights, of course. Disagreements about money, about priorities, about whether to expand the herd or focus on crops. But they worked through them, learning the rhythm of partnership, the give and take of 2 stubborn people choosing to bend instead of break. One evening in late July, they rode out to the north pasture to check the herd. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. The land stretched out around them, vast and unforgiving and beautiful. Ada reined in her horse and looked back at the ranch house, small in the distance. From here, it looked like a toy. Fragile. Temporary. But it wasn't. Not anymore. "What are you thinking?" Silas asked, riding up beside her. "That I almost gave up. Before you came. I almost let Voss win. But you didn't." "No." She smiled. "I got stubborn instead. Good thing. Otherwise I'd be dead in a ditch somewhere, and you'd be miserable in town working for some shopkeeper." She laughed. "You think very highly of your contribution. I saved your fence. I saved your life. Fair point." They rode back in comfortable silence, the kind that comes when words aren't necessary. When they reached the barn, Silas dismounted and helped her down, his hands lingering on her waist. "Atta Crow," he said, testing the name. "That's me. Sounds good." "It does." He kissed her then, soft and slow, and she thought about the girl she had been a year ago. Alone, afraid, certain she would lose everything. That girl would never have believed this moment was possible. Autumn brought the harvest. They worked from dawn to dusk, bringing in hay and preparing for winter. Silas built a new storage shed, while Ada worked on expanding the vegetable garden. Her brother got engaged to a girl from town, and they talked about building a cabin on the east section. The ranch was becoming what it was always meant to be, a place where people could build lives, raise families, put down roots, not just survive, but thrive. In October, Ada missed her monthly cycle. She didn't say anything at first, afraid to hope. But when the second month passed, she told Silas over breakfast, her heart hammering. He stared at her. "A baby." "Yes." His face went through a dozen emotions in as many seconds. Shock, fear, wonder, and finally, joy so pure it made her chest ache. "We're having a baby," he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. "We are." He came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For giving me this. A family. A home. A reason to stay." She held him just as tightly, thinking about the terrified man who had bled in her barn. The outlaw who had been running for so long, he had forgotten what it felt like to stop. The partner who had stood beside her through drought and storms and the weight of other people's judgment. "You gave me the same thing," she said. Winter came, and with it a quiet contentment Ada had never known. The ranch was secure. The future was certain. And every night, she fell asleep in the arms of a man who had chosen her when he could have kept running. On Christmas Eve, they sat on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and watching snow fall on the ranch. It was a gentle snow, the kind that softens the world instead of burying it. "You ever think about what would have happened if things had gone different?" Silas asked. "All the time. And I'm grateful they didn't. Every choice I made, even the stupid ones, led me here. To you. To this." He pulled her closer. "I love you, Ada Crow. I love you too." They sat in silence, watching the snow cover the land they had fought so hard to keep. In the spring, there would be new challenges. There always were. But they would face them together, the way they had faced everything else. And that was enough. The baby came in May, a girl with her mother's dark hair and her father's pale eyes. They named her Grace, because that's what she was. A second chance neither of them deserved, but both had earned. Silas held his daughter like she was made of glass, his hands gentle and sure. "She's perfect," he whispered. Ada smiled from the bed, exhausted and happy. "She is. I never thought." He stopped. "I never thought I'd have this." Neither did I. But here they were. A family. A home. A life built from nothing but stubbornness and hope, and the willingness to trust when trust seemed impossible. Outside, the ranch stretched toward the horizon, green and alive under the spring sun. Cattle grazed in the pastures. New fence posts stood straight and strong. The creek ran clear and full, fed by snowmelt from the mountains. Lost Creek Ranch was no longer a place people pitied. It was a place people admired. A place where two broken people had refused to stay broken. Where an outlaw had found redemption, and a lonely woman had found love. And every day, when Ada looked out over the land she had fought so hard to keep, she thought about the moment she had opened that barn door and found a bleeding stranger in the hay. She thought about the choice she had made, the risk she had taken, the trust she had offered when every instinct told her to run. And she was grateful, because that choice, that risk, that trust had given her everything. It had given her a partner who saw her, a home that was truly hers, a future that stretched out bright and wide and full of possibility. It had given her grace, and it had given her the one thing she had been searching for all along, a place to belong.